Okay, so you've had months of these gorgeous orchid flowers, and then the last one drops. It's a moment every single orchid owner knows. You're left looking at this bare green stalk, and you can't help but wonder, is that it? Is it over? Well, what we're going to do in this explainer is show you why that moment isn't the end. It's actually the beginning. I mean, this is the big question, isn't it? The plant that was the absolute star of your living room is now, well, it's a pot of leaves and a stick. And it's so easy to feel a little let down, you know? Maybe even like you did something wrong. But the thing I've learned is that what happens next, well, that's completely up to you.
That's exactly it. You got to think of it less like an ending and more like a signal. Your orchid's just entering a new phase, and if you know what to look for, you can actually guide it to a pretty spectacular second act. So where do we even begin? All right, first things first. Before we even think about making a cut, we have to understand what we're working with. You know, a surgeon has to know anatomy, right? Well, an orchid owner has to know their plant. This is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about. Okay, let's clear up the number one misconception right away. That long stalk the flowers grew on, that's not the stem. The real stem is that little core part down at the base where the leaves and roots come out. What you're looking at is a flower spike, and its whole job is basically reproduction. But here's the cool part. It holds the secret to getting even more flowers. And that brings us to the most important feature on that spike, the node. Seriously, go look closely at your orchid spike. You'll see these little bumps, and each one is covered by a tiny, kind of triangular flap of skin. Inside those nodes, that's where you find meristematic cells. Just think of them as plant stem cells. They hold all the potential for new growth. I'm talking a new branch of flowers, or maybe even a whole new plant.
But, and this is the key takeaway, not all nodes are created equal. You have to be able to tell the difference. So a dormant, viable node, that's the one we're looking for. It has that little protective cover, it's called a bract, sitting totally flush against the spike. It's like a fully charged battery. Now, an exhausted node, one where a flower or branch already grew, that bract will be pushed away. That battery's spent. Our job is to hunt for the charged ones.
Okay, so now that you know how to spot a viable node, we can get to the main event. It's a simple, super strategic procedure that growers call the node count trick. And trust me, this is not just random chopping. It is a calculated move designed to redirect your orchid's energy.
This is pretty much the standard, most reliable way to do it. First, you got to check your spike. Is it still nice and green, healthy? If it's turning yellow or brown, just leave it. The plant's already pulling nutrients back from it. But if it's green, you're good to go. So you count 2 nodes up from the base of the plant. Then, and this is the most critical step, seriously, you sanitize your blade. Use a flame, alcohol, whatever. It's totally non-negotiable if you want to prevent infection. Then you make one clean cut. For a final little pro tip, dab a bit of ground cinnamon right on the cut. It's a natural fungicide and helps it seal up.
Now, the exact placement of that cut is what makes this whole thing work. You're not cutting on the node, you're cutting about a ½ inch to an inch above it. Why? Well, that little extra bit of spike acts like a buffer. It stops the cut end from drying out and killing the node right below it. That tiny little ½ inch can literally be the difference between success and failure.
Okay, let's get real for a second. This is not a guaranteed magic trick. We're looking at maybe a 50% success rate. So you might be asking, why not 100%? Well, a lot of it comes down to stuff we just can't control, like the specific genetics of your plant, its overall health, how much energy it has stored up. But honestly, a 50-50 shot at getting a whole new spray of flowers, yeah, I'll take those odds any.
And speaking of success rates, this brings us to what might be the single most important lesson in orchid care. You have to know what kind of orchid you're dealing with. Because this whole node cutting trick, it's perfect for the standard Phalaenopsis orchids you see everywhere. But for other types, it can be a huge mistake. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
Here is the golden rule. If your orchid has those big, round flowers that all kind of open at once in a big flush, that's a standard hybrid. You can go ahead and cut the spike using the trick we just talked about. But if it has smaller, star-shaped, maybe waxy-looking flowers that open 1 or 2 at a time over a long period, that's a novelty hybrid. Do not cut the spike on those as long as it's green. You'll literally be cutting off the next batch of flowers because they bloom right from the tip over and over. And this really breaks down why that is. Look at their blooming habits. Standard hybrids are bred for one big, simultaneous show. Bam, all the flowers open. So cutting the spike to try and get a second, smaller show makes sense. But novelty hybrids, they're bred for a long, sequential performance. The spike is literally designed to just keep blooming from the end. Cutting it while it's green is like stopping a movie halfway through. And then you have multifloras. They can be a bit more unpredictable. The real key here is to just watch your plant. Understand its natural rhythm before you even think about grabbing the scissors.
All right, so you've made the perfect cut on the right kind of orchid. Now what? Well, the cut itself doesn't magically create flowers. Think of it like this. The cut is just permission for new growth. The actual signal, the thing that tells it to go, that comes from the environment. And this right here? This is the secret code. This is the magic number. To wake that dormant node up, the plant needs a very specific signal. And that signal is a consistent drop in the nighttime temperature, right down into that 55 to 65 degree Fahrenheit range. This drop basically mimics the changing seasons and its natural habitat, and it's what tells the plant, okay, it's time. Time to make more flowers.
And it can't just be a one-night thing. The orchid needs to feel those cooler nights over and over again consistently for about 3 to 4 weeks. That steady, prolonged signal is what finally convinces the plant to switch out of leaf and root mode and into flower mode. And, for most of us, something as simple as moving it to a cooler windowsill a night is all it takes.
But of course, temperature isn't the whole story. Your orchid still needs plenty of bright, indirect light to build up all that energy. It needs good humidity, otherwise new buds can just dry up and fall off. And you need a gentle, consistent feeding schedule. A lot of growers use the mantra weekly for their fertilizer. And then, once you see those new buds start to form, you can ease up on the food.
Okay, so we have totally covered the core technique. Now let's dive into some more advanced strategy, because the best orchid growers know that every single plant is an individual, and sometimes you're gonna need to do a little troubleshooting.
I like to think of an orchid as having a limited energy budget, just like we do. It can spend that energy on growing bigger and stronger, making new leaves, new roots, or it can spend it on the luxury item, which is making flowers. So when we force the second bloom, what we're really doing is telling the plant, hey, spend your savings account on flowers right now, instead of investing in your long-term health.
And that brings you to probably the most important decision you'll make as an orchid owner. You have to be really honest and assess your plant. Does it look robust? Firm leaves, lots of healthy roots. If yes, then by all means, go for that second bloom. But if it looks even a little bit stressed, if the leaves are limp, if there aren't many roots, do the plant a huge favor. Cut the entire spike off right at the base. Yeah, you're sacrificing flowers now, but you're setting yourself up for a much bigger, healthier plant and a way more spectacular bloom next year. Okay, let's talk about something that trips up pretty much every new orchid grower. You see some new growth poking out and you get super excited, but wait, is it a new flower spike or is it just a root? The secret is all in the tip. A new flower spike will have a kind of knobby, flattened tip. It looks a lot like a little mitten. A root, on the other hand, will always have a smooth, perfectly rounded, silvery green tip. It's a really simple visual check that will save you a whole lot of confusion.
And now, let's talk about a little bit of science magic.
If you really want to take the guesswork out of this whole process, there's a product out there called Kiki paste. What is it? Well, it's basically a paste that's loaded with a powerful plant growth hormone. When you put it directly on a dormant node, it's like a hormonal sledgehammer. It forces that node to wake up and start growing pretty much no matter what the environment is telling it to do. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Where you apply the paste can actually change what grows. If you put it on one of the upper nodes, say the 4th or 5th one, you're most likely going to get a new branch of flowers. But if you apply that same paste to one of the lower nodes, the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, you might get a kiki. That's Hawaiian for baby. A perfect little clone of your original plant will start growing right there on the spike. All you have to do is gently peel back that tiny protective bract to expose the node underneath, and then just apply a tiny pea-size amount. And really, that brings us right back to the heart of it all. All of these techniques we've covered, they give you, the grower, a choice. You can push for a quick secondary bloom right now, or you can choose to cut that spike, invest in the plant's long-term health, and get a truly spectacular show next season. There isn't a single right answer here. There's only the right answer for your specific plant in its current condition, and now you have the knowledge to make that choice.